Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Cut the Shit, a podcast series that aims to take a closer look at the impact of the IT industry, both the good and the bad. Cut the Shit is brought to you by Plow Networks, a managed IT services company based just outside Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Bryan Link, EVP of Products and Services here at Plow, and I'll be your host for this series. I'll ask questions, and with the help of our guests, try to dig deep on some of the key challenges we all face dealing with IT. So with that, let's cut the shit and get started. On today's episode, it's my pleasure to have Plow's newest employee, Kevin Phillips, as my guest. Kevin joined us a few weeks ago as a senior engineer working on our cloud and systems team, and we're super excited to have him on board. But that's not why I asked him on the podcast today. I asked Kevin to come on because I thought it would be interesting to get his thoughts on the tech recruiting and hiring process, since he just went through it. During our conversation, I get Kevin to share details on the recruiting experience from some of his recent roles, what he thought went well and what didn't with some of those experiences, and what one of his employers did right that kept him there and kept him energized for almost 10 years. I wrap up by asking Kevin to grade his recruiting and onboarding experience with us. And in true cut the shit fashion, he does just that. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Kevin Phillips. Kevin, thanks for joining Cut the Shit. How you doing today?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you both as a new member of the team and to have you on the podcast. We've had a number of employees on the podcast over. Gosh, we've been doing this now a little over a year, which is hard to believe. But this one's kind of interesting and maybe a little near and dear to my heart just because of what we're going to talk about today. But before we sort of jump into that, why don't you give us a little bit of, can you give us some background, kind of give us a thumbnail sketch on your background? You don't have to go into every detail, but sort of how you kind of got started into technology and kind of hit the high notes to bring us up to today.
Okay, yeah. As you know, for us tech guys, it's hard not to go into detail. So when I'm digging too deep, go.
Yeah, I'll pull you up. I can pull you up, yeah.
The way that I got into technology or just IT, I was always interested in how things work. That got me in trouble as a kid because I would take things apart like the radio. Didn't have any money to put it back together, so I had to figure out, how to do it. So that was the, infrastructure side of it. And then once I learned that you can actually, program and automate and do things to make the systems do what you want them to do without manually touching them, that piqued my interest as well. So just always had a curiosity for learning and growing. And in technology, it's nonstop. So that's really what interests me in IT. Started off MTSU, computer science, computer engineering. And I quickly realized, that I did.
Did you think you wanted to be a programmer at that point? Was that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, I did. I took all the classes and I was like, well, if I'm smart enough to do it, this must be what I want to do. I did some programming for about a year and a half and I was just bored with it. And I'm not one to do well with being bored. I'll go find something to get into and create trouble, good trouble, sometimes bad trouble. So I talked to some colleagues where I was working and just, asked, well, what do you guys do over here and how does it relate to everything else? And they seem more relatable as far as just individuals. All of the guys that I was working with, I had nothing in common with them. And it was boring. I started dreading going into the office and things like that. And I realized very early on that I didn't want to, live just to exist in my job role and whatever that I'm doing, I actually wanted to live. So started to venture out and see, what would pique my interest. At that time, it was infrastructure systems type things. So I delved into that. Went from my first job out of college and then went on to a company called BMI, Broadcast Media. Am I able to say company names and things?
Oh, yeah.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a secret. Yeah. If they got a problem, they can call me. I think it'll be okay. You did work there, right?
Yeah.
It's not, don't divulge any, I guess, company secrets, but I'm pretty sure that's not where we're going with this.
Yeah. No, not at all. What I was going to say is the environment there was great early on. I learned a tremendous amount of information, both about myself as well as technology, and I could relate to those individuals. Part of work was like going to MTV Music Awards, the
Yeah.
Grammys. And,
Yeah, it had a little glitter on that one, didn't it?
oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
uh, it was good, man, and I, it was good until it wasn't. I read somewhere once that said people do not leave companies; they leave bad bosses. And my boss was tremendous. My direct report was tremendous, but there were some other people that came in and just changed the culture of the place. And
Yeah, that's funny. I've heard, that's a famous expression that I think is partially true. I mean, or it can be 100% true, right? If you get a new manager and you can't get along with him or her or whatever, that's certainly true. But I also think that leadership or management is usually not just one person, right? I mean, you can have a great manager depending on the structure of the company, and things can change around that person, above that person, and cause all kinds of issues. So I think it's probably broader. It's maybe management or something like that as opposed to manager. But yeah, the point's still valid.
absolutely, absolutely. So, in that, I kind of switch gears in my mind as to what satisfies me as far as an individual. I've always, like I said, I've always liked, the culture and actually enjoying where I'm going into work, whether it's here at home, an office, wherever. You want to enjoy the people that you work with, and that led me to my next opportunity at Vanderbilt.
Okay, so hang on before we since the nature of this discussion is about recruiting and hiring and finding positions and finding talent. So let's take one step back. You were in a previous position, then you went to BMI. How did you get to BMI? What was the process through which you found that position?
So it's weird. And this has happened to me twice, sort of here at Plow, and we'll get to that once we, wrap. I interviewed for the position at BMI. I never applied for that position. Somehow, a recruiter called me one day. I don't know if he had the wrong number or what, but and it's funny because I never met that recruiter until like physically met him until about a year and a half, 2 years after I worked at BMI. So I interviewed for the position at BMI. It was a terrestrial radio station remote engineer. So I was responsible for making sure that static was not in the radio station
Okay.
that you're hearing. Now that sounds fun or easy or whatever, but in the middle of December in Pittsburgh, when there's 2 feet of snow on the roof of a building,
It ain't easy to do, is it? Yeah.
not at all. Not at all. So I had to make a lot of friends in a lot of places. So I'm calling like, hey, can you go check the antennas, make sure everything's okay? So, but the gig was overall, it was fun, interesting, and so I interviewed for that position. The manager at the time, great guy. I still keep in contact with him now. Funny guy. He told me these exact words. He said, "Man, I want to hire you for this position. There's another guy that I interviewed that has the exact experience for this position. Once I get a position, I'll call you and you'll have 2 weeks to put in your notice wherever you are. You can come work with me." And I go, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah, y'all never hear from this guy, right?
I'll
Yeah.
never hear from this guy again. So I'm at work one day, my phone rings, and I answer the phone and he goes, put in that 2 week notice. That's the first thing he said. And I'm like, huh? Who's this? What's going on? And he told me who he was, where, and I'm like, I gotta come work with you.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
You kept your word. So, and I asked him, I was like, what made you, what made me stand out? He said, I asked you a question in the interview. You didn't know the answer to it. You told me that you would get back to me with the answer. 15 minutes after the interview, I checked my voicemail and it was you on the voicemail telling me the answer to that question. I don't know how the heck you got it, where you went and got it from, but you followed up like you said you would. So I had to keep my word. And I did,
Right.
so it worked out well, man. And it was some fun times. I was there, a good deal of my career. So I enjoyed it. I'm
How long were you at BMI?
10 years.
Okay, I was gonna say I was trying to remember because obviously this is not a secret. Your resume is not a secret to me. I've seen it, but I didn't remember the dates, and I was thinking it was 7-8 years at a minimum. I knew it was a long time, but I couldn't remember for sure. Yeah, so 10 years. That's a long stretch these days.
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
Now during that time, How many different jobs did you do? I don't care about the title necessarily, but did you change jobs? Did you do different things? My assumption is the answer to that question is yes, but I'm curious if that's the case.
Yeah, and I mean you're familiar with technology, IT, the department. Yeah, so whether it was because of shorthands or knowledge or whatever, or just me wanting to learn something different, I did several different jobs from what my title was, and in that I was allowed to grow into the position that I'm in now. Ultimately, it prepared me for this.
My assumption is that's one of the reasons you stayed there for 10 years too, is the ability to grow and change in that. But so you didn't get back to that boredom issue, right?
Exactly. And it's crazy how, I think before you start recording, we were just talking about life and how things go. I never thought that I would be in a position of boredom again, but it happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, so once I did the BMI run for a decade, uh, I I then took some time off. When I left BMI, I honestly took, I think, about 4 to 6 months off just to relax.
Nice. Yeah, that's a real blessing. Not everybody, gets to do that, and to be able to do that and to have that sort of reflective time. That's powerful.
Exactly what it was too, reflective and to prioritize what's important, and to be able to say the next place that I go or the next job that I do, I want it to have purpose as well, um, as have a balance in work life and um, to be able to understand what that truly means. I think is a maturity thing. I think a lot of people say it and spit those catchphrases out, but not many people understand it until you actually have a life outside of work. What work life balance is. So that's very important to me, and that was my main reason for wanting to be at a place like Vanderbilt. I've heard so much about the culture, work-life balance, and not everything is a fire.
Right.
That type of thing. So
So did you seek out Vanderbilt in this instance?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. There was there's a gentleman there that he's still there. Um, a recruiter called me about the Vanderbilt position, and Um, I told him some of the things that I had heard about Vanderbilt, both positive and negative. And he said, "Well, let you talk to this individual. I think that, once you have that conversation with him, you'll hash out those things and you'll either make a decision, yes or no, very
Right.
fast."
Right.
Had the conversation with the gentleman, and immediately I was like, "Yeah, I can work with you. We have several things that are aligned, um, and let's see if we can have some fun."
Was he the manager?
No, he was the manager's manager.
Okay. So he's a few steps up the food chain. Okay.
Exactly. And it was a little bit different than what the position was. What I was told was a little bit different than what the position was. And once I got in, I like a challenge, so I'm like, this isn't what I thought, but let me see." And I had the conversation. I'm very transparent. I had the conversation with that gentleman, and I told him, I said, "Man, this was after about 8 months in. I said, I'm not enjoying this. I'm not learning things that are beneficial. It's more homegrown type,
Right.
technology that I wouldn't be able to use this anywhere, or even here. I'm not going to grow in this position with this. This is it.
Right.
And he asked me to give him some time on that, and did that, and it still was geared more towards something that wasn't interesting to me. And I got a call from a guy that I'd worked with before. Wait, hang on. Let me back up a bit. So I went from BMI to a company called Trexus. Um, Totally forgot that piece of my life, but that was a short stint. It was an interesting experience there. Yeah. So once I left Trexus, I that's when I was approached by Vanderbilt, and like I said, I did the role, learned several things that I maybe use again. I learned several things that I hope to never use again. And I said that in my exit interview. But the way that I got to Plow, I worked very close with James Golden on a project somewhere else. And, I told him, I said, man, it seems like you guys are doing a lot of interesting things over there. You guys are learning a lot. It's always something going on. And if you ever have an opportunity, let me know. James said, I sure as hell will. And if you know James, those are his words. Um, a year or two went by, and James and I, we talk, every now and again about some of his out of work experiments that he's
Yeah, he's a bit of a mad scientist on the weekends. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
exactly. So he called me out of the blue one day, or actually he sent me a message on LinkedIn, I think, and I'm never on LinkedIn. I probably got it 3 weeks after he sent it or whatnot. And we met up for lunch, talked about the position, talked about the company. He gave me the good, the bad, the ugly, as he does, and I told him I'm interested. So that's how I landed here at Plow. And as you know, whoever's watching or listening doesn't know, but I started 2 weeks ago. So
Yeah, you're brand new, right? I mean, you've had enough to figure out. I would say where the bathroom is, but we don't we're not in the office enough for it to even matter where the bathroom is that much. I mean, that's only for get-togethers and things. Seems like so. Yeah, you're brand new, which is great on the front end of that, and so that's it. It is a good it's a good time. That's part of why I wanted to talk to you now before you. I didn't want you to get institutionalized, right? I wanted to be fresh in your mind about the recruiting process and the onboarding process for us, and what was the thought or the thinking around this, the decision to come to join us, and how that compared with with some of the other decisions you've made. And so, you know and we haven't really talked about this, and I now that you work for us, I don't have to worry about it anymore. But did you talk to anybody else? Were you looking for any other positions at the same time you were talking to us, because it sounds like you pretty much made your mind up. You were going to leave Vanderbilt assuming you could find the right place. Is that a fair statement?
that's a great assessment of it.
I mean, you weren't going to walk out the door. It wasn't like, I got to be gone in 2 weeks, come hell or high water. But it was, I know I'm going to need to find a new challenge.
Yes, yeah, that's accurate. And to be fair to my Vanderbilt team, we had great cohesiveness. It was nice individuals, a great team. But it's weird because I got a text message this morning. I I can kind of foreshadow or foresee some things, the writing on the wall of things that are happening and how things will seem to transpire. Once you've been in this long enough, you can kind of understand what's to come a bit. And to answer your question, I did have two other conversations with different companies. What they were, where they were going, and what the position that they were hiring for did not align with um, what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. My main goal is to continue to learn, to continue to grow, help to be an asset to whatever team that I'm on, um, and be of most benefit to that company. Um, the positions that I talked to the other companies about were more of the legacy technology, and they weren't looking to go from legacy to uh, forward thinking, or what the newer technology. So in that it would have been a cushy, comfortable. I know everything
Right.
that's going on. I may not know all the answers, but I know pretty much.
Right.
This position, I'm learning. I'm able to teach, but I'm learning a hell of a lot. Um, and I'm appreciative of that. Like I want to learn. That's a gift and a curse for me. I'm always wanting more. Wanting to know more. Not knowing when to give up on something is one of my flaws, I would say. So I'm eager to learn, and I think that this position is. I feel strongly that this position is correct for me to do
So
that.
because you haven't been here long enough, because you just got started, I don't know if we can deliver on that promise that you're looking for or not, right? We're going to try, and I think we can. Obviously, I believe we can, but I don't know for sure. The proof we'll know 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now, right? We'll have a much.
I disagree. I disagree with that. I've been here 2 weeks and I've learned.
Okay. Well, that's fair. Well, I like that. I just meant like I'm trying to compare in my mind. If I think about a guy, if the fact that you work for us is, I mean, it's very relevant to this discussion, but it's also, I think, indicative of a broader set of circumstances that I think most IT managers or business owners who have technology people working for them, and not just technology. I'm going to speak specifically about technology people, but I think it's more generalized than that. You know, when I hear you talk about your experience at BMI, right? There's a lot of smiles. You got warm. You still have relationships from that gig. You have a lot of positive things to say about it. Not that you have negative things to say about Vandy, because based on the conversation, it wasn't anything bad there. But you felt it sounded like you were worried you were just going to kind of stagnate, right? That was a concern, and that didn't seem to be the case at BMI. And obviously, it wasn't, because you stayed there a long time. I mean, you're a young guy. 10 years at a job is a very long time now. You don't see that much, right? And so I'm thinking, you know, what in the contours of that time, how did you think about was there a shelf life to the certain things that you were working on? How did you feel like what did they do right in terms of helping you sort of move from, I won't say station to station, but from interest to interest, or continuing to build on a skill set so that you felt like you were creating more value, you're learning, you're interested, engaged, want to go to work, you're growing in value at the company, so you're making some more money, you're doing more things. All those things have to kind of go together. What was it that they did right that we could sort of draw from, not just for, I'm thinking selfishly for us at Plow, I want to make sure, I'd love to think you worked for us for 10 years, right? And so that's an important, kind of way for me to think about it. But I think it's instructive for other people to hear that.
So I think, the term meeting people where they are, it's just like any relationship, whether it's a business partnership, a marriage, or just a platonic, whatever. The communication is key. And one of the things that my manager, my direct manager, she had a photographic memory, and I was always amazed by that. I mean, literally, she would say, "Hey, Bryan, you remember we did that podcast and you had on, the striped shirt or whatever?" And I'm like, I don't remember what I had on last week. What are you talking? But she was amazing. But she also always had an interest in everybody on her team excelling, because if we fail, she failed. So, in our one-on-ones, it was more of, what's going on with your family. Where do you want to be in this company, or even outside of this company? What do you want to learn? What is it that excites you about what you're doing? What is it that excites you about what you can do? So asking those type of questions and actually listening to the answers is key. I think that when, a lot of times people do things out of whatever they think is the correct thing to do as far as their position. What I mean by that is, well, we have this list of Google questions that we should ask, as a manager or whatever. And regardless of what the person says back, well, I did my part because I asked the questions. But it wasn't that. It was more of a mindset of, if you tell me you want to do this and it can benefit the company as well, I'm gonna make sure that it happens. And BMI had a different checkbook. They it was, what do you want? Let's go get it. So that's what kept me around, was because there were no limitations in regards to what it is that you can do. If you even wanted to jump teams, but you had to go over on this team and learn their stuff, on your free time, then go do that and come back and let's see if we can't make it work.
Right. So it was flexible in that sense, in the sense of trying to pair people with interests and opportunities, and then strengths and interests. Yeah, because we're having this conversation internally about what, we want to make sure that we know what people are interested in or where they think they'd like to go, but we need to match that up with their skills too, because sometimes people want to do something that's maybe not a good fit for them, right? And so you got to make those two things come together, for sure. That's interesting. I just was thinking about it in looking at someone like you with a career who's had, not that you've had multiple successes, but the BMI, obviously the BMI experience sort of stands out. So what is it that we could learn from that in the context of broader care and feeding of folks, like to keep people engaged, right? Because I tend to think of, I have a bit of a short attention span myself. And so, most of the places where I've been successful or stayed there for a while, it's because realistically I did multiple things. I didn't really do the same thing over and over. And some people like doing the same thing over and over again and get really good at that. And that's a very needed skill. I don't know in technology that it's particularly useful because, to your point, things change so fast. If you're the best guy who knows how to take care of, phone lines, that's it's maybe not where you want to be, right? Even if you're really good at it, because that technology, it still exists, but it's not what it was, right? And it's going away, from that standpoint. As you think about the jobs, and I use jobs in quotes, not companies hiring. I don't mean that. I mean the jobs, the work that you've done. Do you feel like is there any sort of shelf life in your mindset? Like, can you give a range is it a range of time, or does it sort of depend on the nature of the job or the experience?
I think it's the latter. I think it depends on the nature of the job, because just like, if you're a contract worker and you have a project that you come in for 60, 90, 180 days or whatever, that's the extent of that job. And then you go on to something totally different. It doesn't mean that you failed at that or that it's obsolete now. It's just, that's what it is. And some things will never become obsolete, but you'll grow uninterested in it because of the monotony of it, right? Or for my type personality, if I have to do it more than 5 times, I'm probably going to figure out a way to try to automate it.
Right.
And in some people's eyes, that's lazy.
Not me. Yeah.
They
call that scale in our world, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I hope I answered the question. Or if you need more in depth.
No. That's, obviously, it's kind of a dumb question to a certain extent, because can't say, well, after 18 months, I get bored of doing something, like, because it might be 6 weeks, it might be 3 years. It kind of depends, right, on the nature of what you're doing, and how is it changing, within itself, because the same problem can evolve over time while you're working on it, right? Even though that technically it's the same problem. So, no, that's helpful. Again, I don't want to take up too much time, because I know you got to get back. You're still drinking from the fire hose and trying to figure things out. But a couple more questions before we wrap. As you look back, again, brand new at Plow, just went through a process with us. Went through a process with Vandy a couple of years ago. So it hadn't been too long that you've kind of, navigated the recruiting, onboard, that stuff. You've had some experience with recruiters. You've gone through some interviews. You've probably done some one-on-one interviews. You've done some group interviews. You've done all that. You've covered the gamut. As you think back, what is it that people, can you call out 1 or 2 experiences outside of the BMI guy who, give him props for, he was very clever in the way he dealt with you with the 2 weeks thing. That's very smart. But more generically, what are some things that people did well, and what are some things that people did that you think, if they were to ask you, you'd say, don't do that anymore, because that shit don't work. Or it's off-putting or not helpful or whatever. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at as you think back over the couple of experiences.
Well, I think I don't have to go too far. In regards to the recruiting is totally different now than it was 5 years ago or 2 years ago. A lot of people don't understand that you go to work for financial gain. That's the reason that most people go to work. You want to enjoy what you're doing, but you go to work for the direct deposit.
You got to make a living, right? You got to make a living. That's right. First and foremost, right? The goal, I've always said, not to interrupt you, but I've always said that if I can take money off the table, right, in the sense of meaning that it's, it doesn't mean that you have to pay the most or that you pay the least, but you that doesn't become the primary decision maker, then I got a chance, right? Then because then you can have all the other things that all these other what I'd call self-actualization things. Can I grow here? Do I like the people? What's the culture like? Because if the money, if it's 50% of what someone else is offering, it doesn't matter. Like you can't that's a bridge too far. You're not going to get there.
Absolutely. And I agree with that wholeheartedly in regards to, what's my purpose here? Am I being beneficial to this company? Am I enjoying, what I'm doing? Because, a lot of people don't understand that your mental is real. You cannot be, there's not going to be, sugar plums and candy clouds every day anywhere. I get that. But you cannot expect to exist healthy in a place where it's just a fire all day, every day. If you're going to do that, then you should get the satisfaction of being a fireman, saving somebody's life, right?
Yeah, maybe get on a calendar. I don't know.
Exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. But to answer your question about the recruiting, um, we've all been called for a position where we're like, did you even look at my resume? I, I've never been an astronaut. Why are you calling me about driving a spaceship? So, and that's an exaggeration, but some of the stuff that the recruiters call you about is like you're not good at your job because you
Right.
want me to go do something that I'm not good at. But again, it always goes back to communication. The good things that have been done, the follow-ups. I know that everyone is busy, everyone has things going on, but if you know I'm being asked to be at a office to interview with somebody, at least have somebody there within 15 minutes or something to meet me. I've sat in the lobby for about 28 minutes waiting for just an individual, and everybody, was like, "Oh crap, I
Right.
forgot you're even coming. I'm over this side of town. I'm not even in the country," and this things like that. So just communication, and that, I mean, that says a lot to an individual that's coming to interview for this position or coming to meet with whomever for this position. That, well, did I not mean enough, or
Right.
what's going on on the other side of that door, to where these things are happening regularly. But I think that the best things that have happened is the true transparency of what it is you're walking into. You know, just give the truth, and let the chips fall where they may. Just tell, because if I'm in an interview and that you ask me a question that I have absolutely no idea what it is, I'm gonna write it down. Tell you I don't even know where to start on that. And most people would lie and try to.
Right. Make some answer. Yeah. Make something that sounds okay, something that sounds plausible. Right.
Exactly. My grandmother told me a long time ago, you can pretend to be stupid, you cannot pretend to be smart. If you don't know it, you don't know it.
Right.
you know. Um and that's something that I take to heart. I don't want to try and impress somebody with something that I don't know. I'd rather tell you I don't know that, but I'm willing to go, try to figure it out.
Do you feel like people on the other side of the table are willing to take that same approach, or are they oftentimes? Do you feel like you're getting BS'd sometimes when you ask questions or part of the discussion during interviewing? I mean, I know what I think about it, and we, to your point, we try our best. I mean, it's hard not to sell during an interview when you want somebody, right?
Right.
And selling oftentimes can be putting your best foot forward. It's not lying. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to share everything, right, in the context of selling. But in this case, you do need to, I mean, you're asking somebody to come spend every day and hang out with you and be part of the team, right? And so they need to get a sense of who they'll be working with, what would the nature of the work be, what's the environment like, what's the sort of the collective mentality, where the way do people, do people laugh a lot, or is it a really serious place? I mean, just little things like that, because not everybody wants to be somewhere where it's, where everybody's joking all the time. That's fine. Some people, that's what they really want. And I think those are the kinds of things that maybe are important, that don't always, I think, get sussed out during the hiring process.
I agree. And to answer your question, I think that I think mostly the interviews that I've been in, um, I always do something different. I always ask for the team. Let's have a conversation with the manager, not in the room, without the manager being in the room.
Yeah.
So, if I'm coming to talk to you guys, hey Bryan, it was good talking to you, but
Yeah, you should talk to James and those guys. Yeah, see what they have to say. All right. Yeah.
And
they don't need to tell me what they told you, right? That's between. I mean, if I don't have enough confidence to feel like, I'm doing all right and that they're getting what they need, then that's the issue, and it has nothing to do with you, right?
Exactly. So I try to suss out those type of things way ahead of time by asking the questions that I ask. And I've been on that side of the table to where, I've had a guy come in. It's intimidating, regardless of how much you know. It feels like you against, the United States Congress when it's
Yeah.
five.
A little bit like getting grilled, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah.
And I could tell looking at the guy's resume, and I'm like, if you didn't just make this stuff up on here, like your stuff. So I told him, don't even look at us, just look down, and tell us what you know how to do. And that guy, I still keep in contact with him now. He's like, man, I thank you every day for that interview, that push, because I was nervous as hell, and you guys are all. You got what I'm trying to get. I'm like, man, we've all been there, but I do not like those interviews where you know that the person asking you the question doesn't know the answer to the question.
Right. Well, and I mean, and the funny thing about an interview, right, is you can be good at interviewing and not be good at doing whatever the job is, right? I mean, we didn't hire you to be good at interviewing, right? We hired you to be a good engineer. Right? So, and that's true in lots of cases. So how do you get, there's ways around that, but I do think, we still depend, right or wrong, on looking somebody eyeball to eyeball, asking questions, having conversations, those kinds of things. And that's not everybody's strength, right? I mean, if you're an extreme introvert and you're not someone who's comfortable with that, then that's a tough scenario to be in. You are a guy, you're pretty extroverted. You do well talking to people. Not everybody's into that, particularly in technology. And there are some fantastic technology people who suck at face-to-face interviews, right? I mean, that is not what they do, right? But we're not hiring them to do that anyway. So how do we, being smart enough to understand that in the process is something that we as hiring folks need to be aware of, because I think we fall into a trap of, well, when we hire somebody, we do A, B, C, and D, and if they score well on A, B, C, and D, then we hire them, assuming they're all equal, and that can apply to all kinds of different jobs, which really doesn't make a lot of sense. Other than that it's easy, right? That's it. I mean, at the end of the day, lots of things happen because they're easy, not because they're optimal. I mean, that's true.
Yes. I agree.
So, okay. So last question, and this is, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I want you, you do what you do. You answer it the way you want to answer it.
All right.
What kind of feedback do you have for us in terms of I'm going to use recruiting to mean pre-onboarding. That's from the initial conversation to, you getting a job offer and getting accepted. So like that first part and then the onboarding. What feedback do you have for us? What did we do well and where did we fall short?
The recruiting was spot on. I mean, James and I had a rapport. We had
we had an unfair advantage to a certain degree because of the relationship with the two of you.
Right. But I think that's key though, man. I think that, if somebody has been over here and they say, man, it's actually okay. It's somebody that you trust, as opposed to just it's just like you guys, like taking a chance on me from 100 other resumes, and there's no James or there's no whoever to say he's
yeah, I've worked with this guy. This guy's good. We should hire him, right? I mean, that's everybody will. That's the sort of that's almost as good. That's about as good as it can get, right? Is to have that kind of referral, other than to have someone who worked with you before, right? Because you and I didn't work together, but I got the next best thing, which was you and James had already kind of worked together, client to customer sort of thing.
For sure. So our situation is a bit unique. I would say, the recruiting, even our conversation with, you and I meeting, everybody that's watching and listening doesn't know this, but you and I met, my son was with me. He likes Mr. Bryan because Mr. Bryan purchased cake pops. So he thinks that every time he sees you, he's going to get a cake pop.
Uh-oh. All right. I'm gonna have to keep that in mind. Next time he's around, I can't let him down.
Exactly.
I'm training to be a grandparent. I don't have any grandkids yet, but that's the next phase. at some point in my life. So I'm going to be ready for that. And I'm going to be the guy that gives out a lot of candy and sugar and stuff. So,
that's all it takes. That
easy.
And stories about their parents, you'll be good. But yeah, so all of that is key to me. The type of rapport, with my family, with not only me, but what are their interests and things like that. But as far as the onboarding, the only it was unique to me because I've never been with a company that doesn't have an official whomever, as far as like these are the HR people. This is the director of HR. This is the assistant director of HR, and those people to give you those type of things. So I'm still kind of looking for some things as far as information that I would need, HR related, but nothing that's.
Yeah, we're weak there. I mean, we're now that's a function. This is not an excuse. It's a fact. We're a smaller company, right? We're 30 something employees. Now, some companies that are 30 something employees do have someone who's dedicated to HR, but very often not, right? And so, yeah, we got to get better there, and that's something we definitely want to work on. I want to ask you some more about that. We don't need to do that on the podcast, but I'd like to know specifically because we do need to. I do think the last thing you want is someone to be all excited about taking a job and then get on, as soon as they sign up, things start to not feel like they're real well put together, and it can raise questions about. I mean, you can't. There's no way to avoid it except to think, well, what does that mean? Are there other areas where we're loosey goosey on things, right? And look, no company's perfect. I went to the biggest company I ever worked for was probably the slowest in terms of handling the onboarding process. So it's not necessarily a function of size completely in terms of efficiency and doing the process well. I do think it's a function of intentionality, putting the time and effort into it. Kind of like, we got a job interview with Kevin next Tuesday at 2:00. If it's not a priority and everybody forgets about it, well, what does that communicate to Kevin? Because in Kevin's mind, it's real damn important. He's thinking about changing jobs. It's a big deal, right? For somebody else, it's just another 2:00 on the calendar between 1:00 with customer A and 3:00 with committee B or whatever. You know what I mean? You got to be careful with that for sure.
Yeah. No, and I don't think that it's so extreme to where it would make anyone consider like, did I make a mistake? It's nothing like that. I think that anyone with gauging the situation entirely, it's a small company. It's a lot of things I didn't know what to expect. It's a lot of things that are a lot better because of the small company. Sometimes we lose focus on the individuals in the small companies and in the larger companies. And what I mean by that is even the smaller customers that we have. We don't want to get so big to where our smaller customers are just our smaller customers. No, they are important as well, and the way that we treat our customers should be the way that we treat our people.
Right. Fair. Okay. Well, I always like to close out with a couple of personal questions, not related to hiring or recruiting, whatever, just to give a little bit of insight into you as a person. So, I know you're busy. You got a son. You got a lot of soccer and stuff going on, but I know you got a little bit of time in the spaces in between. You got anything? Can you tell us something that you've read or watched lately that you think others maybe ought to check out?
Well, you sent me the last thing that I got distracted with the Zero Trust, I think it was. So that's the last thing that I read that everybody should check out. Especially, in IT, is security is so important. And I think that is like the word love. I think it's overused. But you have to understand it. And regardless of what your role is in an organization, you want to have some foundational knowledge of security. Because there are more and more attempts every day, every minute, every hour. So you can share that link.
Yeah. We'll put that in the show notes because it was he's talking about an article in the Wall Street Journal. It was about how really sort of the gap between where most companies are relative to being, what I'd call pretty secure. I mean, security is a moving target, and it's not binary. It's not you're either secure or you're not, right? There's a continuum. But it was about that and about how many the shocking statistic in there was how many companies don't even have multi-factor authentication, right? Which is in many ways sort of a foundational and kind of a, that's baby steps really towards being secure. It takes out a lot of problems. It doesn't take out anything. It doesn't take out everything. But if you were to ask a security consultant or a cybersecurity insurance person or something, they'd be like, well, you got to have this. And then they'd start talking about all the other stuff. And like, I can't remember the percentage, but it's a large percentage of companies don't even have that they haven't taken that first step. If you want to, if you think of, learn how to ride a bike, that's getting on with the training wheels. Like, and that means most people haven't even gotten on the bike, other than maybe to sit on the seat. So, we got a long way to go for sure.
Not us. Well,
yeah, I mean, we're on our own security journey, right? And that's one of the things James and I talked about that back, I guess it was about 6-8 months ago on this podcast, because it was about the same thing, how it's interesting. We're a company that helps other companies do stuff securely, right? We're not a security company, but we help you do network management and monitoring securely, cloud services securely, end user support security, desktop, endpoint management securely. Security is a thread that runs through all that, but we're not a security company. But we also have our own endpoints. We have our own devices. We have our own identities that can be hacked. We have our own email system, which is where most of the problems originate for companies, is in email. Well, we have email too. So we have to, I hate the old expression, eat our own dog food, but we have to turn that same focus onto ourselves and make sure that we're not in a position to get compromised, right? Or get hit with a ransomware attack, or, all the kinds of things that can happen, because they could just easily happen to us as they could to anybody, a manufacturing company, a retail company, law firm, whatever, doesn't matter. Okay. Last question. Your first technology memory, and it can't be watching TV or talking on the telephone.
My uncle installed cell phones in cars.
Like in the bag, or like the mounted? Were they the mounted ones?
Both.
Okay.
He worked for South Central Bell.
Yep.
Was it South Central Bell that was
one of the baby bells? Yeah, when they broke up AT&T a long time ago, that was one of the bells, and then they rolled them all back up into AT&T later.
So yeah, the weirdest thing ever. What intrigued me about that was the antenna. The antenna was like a little
curly. Yep.
Curly, and he would connect it to the back of the vehicle, run the wire all through, and I was just enamored.
Well, it was fascinating. The thought that you could talk on the phone while you were moving.
Yes.
I mean, it's hard. Like, my kids don't know what that, they can't remember a world where that wasn't the case. But I do, just like you do. And it was like it was like something space age. Like, and I say that there were CB radios and short, radios. So, but it was different because it was an actual phone. I mean, you dialed the number and called them, and it worked just like the phone in your house, which was always mounted on the wall. Because at my house, we didn't have a cordless phone. We just had one with a long cord. And if you were stuck in the range with that cord, that was it. So
yeah. It's funny you should say that. We I was just on vacation, and my son, he came, the house that we rented, it had a cordless phone there, and he was like, "What is this?"
He didn't know what it was.
He didn't know what it was. It was the battery. So he didn't believe me that it was a phone, because I'm like, "It's a phone." He's like, "No," but the battery was dead, and I couldn't.
You couldn't show it to call, to make a phone call. Say, see, it actually is a phone.
Exactly. Yeah, I told you it wasn't a phone, Dad. So yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. Yeah. Well, Kevin, listen, man, thank you so much for taking time. I really appreciate it. We are super excited to have you at Plow. And thanks for sharing some stories with us. Hopefully, again, this will be helpful to the audience and thinking about, I think everyone has to up their game all the time in every aspect of their business. Hiring, finding great people, one of the hardest things to do, I think, in business. And so anytime we can hear from someone who's just gone through the process and is sharing, hey, here's a little bit of, here's some insights, here's kind of what I thought about it, I think is helpful. So I appreciate you doing that for us.
I appreciate the opportunity, and like I said before, I'm grateful to be here. I'm looking forward to what the future holds, man.
Absolutely, me too. Well, thanks, Kevin. Have a great day.
Thank you, Bryan.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you were enjoying the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would become a subscriber wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, that would really help us out. Or you can just go old school and tell your friends, your family, your colleagues, And tell anybody else who you think might want to hear something like this to listen in. If you're on social media, make sure to follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @cuttheshit_pod. We are also on TikTok @cuttheshitpod, all one word, where we post lots of clips from the podcast. And last but not least, you can also watch the YouTube version of the show on our YouTube channel @Plow Networks. Until next time, take care and have a great day.